You had previously alluded to some crazy things had happened on tour. Would you care to elaborate? What are some of the craziest things that you've seen on the road?
Okay, well, I mean, the Heavenly Tour was definitely the exact opposite of that. It was the Hellish Tour, Corey's Hell Tour is really what it should have been called, but that was due to infiltration. We had literally infiltration on our last tour. We had people that were sent in that were spies that were not actually there to be musicians, but rather there to cause mayhem. And this was when I hired all the girls. So it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
So
They were.
when was this?
This was on our last tour, the 2017 tour, when I had to shut it down amidst the tour. We had done like 80 shows. It was supposed to go international, but unfortunately, there were some people planted into the tour that were literally just there to cause problems. They were purposely singing off key, purposely playing wrong parts, doing stuff like that so that we would get negative attention, negative reviews, and then made all these terrible allegations after the tour ended, saying we didn't feed them and we didn't pay them and they didn't shower and just stupid stuff. But it went on, and that was a nightmare for us. Obviously, we had all kinds of stuff we had to deal with because of that. And it left a bad taste in my mouth, and especially given the fact that we were doing so well, there was so much success, there was so much positive energy. I mean, the bus broke down 10 times. It happened to be Marilyn Manson's bus, and when I say happened to, I use that term lightly. It happened to be also Marilyn Manson's bus driver, and it also happened to be Marilyn Manson's girlfriend that was part of the band, or one of his girlfriends or whatever. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Do you know who put the infiltrators up to it?
Well, if it smells like a horse and it looks like a horse, chances are it's a horse.
So you think it was Marilyn Manson? Because I know you had some pretty strong words about him. What was it, last year?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the reason why, because we collected all the evidence and we found out everything that we found out, which was that, yes, he was heavily involved in trying to infiltrate that tour. I don't really know the reason. I can't tell you, other than the fact that we just know that he was behind the scenes of a lot of stuff.
Do you remember any of the evidence apart from what you've mentioned? It was the tour bus and his relationship with some of the people.
Right. I mean, like, basically, one day we're on the bus and the driver starts telling us this awful story, which I'm not going to repeat because I don't want to tell, tales out of school. But let's just say, the bus driver told us about this very abusive type behavior that he was exhibiting. And these girls were laughing and thought it was funny. And I was shocked by that. And then as a result, they kind of slipped up, and he was like, well, I've seen you on here before. And she's like, what do you mean I've seen you here before? And he's like, yeah, we saw you last summer. And she's like, oh, this is the same bus? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And that's when it kind of came out. So it wasn't just that, the physical evidence we found later that attached certain things to certain things, but they point blank said it right in front of us, pretty much.
How did those people get hired?
Through Facebook, unfortunately. See, I was very sloppy. We were kind of desperate at the time because we had announced the tour. We had a really good band, and then a couple of the band members fell out for one reason or another. They couldn't make it, and we had to scatter at the last minute to try and find new players. So I put out an open Facebook post and said we were doing an open casting call for, young females who were attractive, who could play multiple instruments, that were willing to wear this ridiculous costume on stage. Because, I mean, a lot of rock and roll girls don't really want to do that. But, look at, if you are willing to wear wings and a halo and dress like an angel, then, you can come audition. So we kind of left it open to anybody. And the other thing we did was open our house up to people and let them stay there if they needed. So we were the perfect patsy.
Do you think that the people who were responsible for this got what they wanted?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the tour shut down, but that was after the third tour. So we'd done 3 legs. And on the third leg, it wasn't necessarily because of them that it shut down. It was because of the fact that the Me Too movement had started and there was all this pressure on me to name names, all this stuff. And that's when I actually decided to just kind of, freeze everything and, serve the higher good and make my documentary, because I felt that that was what needed to happen at that point. So sadly, it definitely, all kind of compounded, but they're not the reason the tour stopped, but they, we're doing things like calling venues ahead of time and putting, let's say, very dark bands ahead of a pop group as the opener. So like one of the things that we're doing on this tour to make sure something like that doesn't happen is we're putting in the contract that we have to approve every opener and make sure that it's got, good pop sensibilities and, it's a normal rock band or pop band that's opening for us, as opposed to some crazy demonic thing, which was happening quite a lot on the Angelic tour, ironically.
Not to belabor the point, but I know you've had some pretty strong words about Marilyn Manson in the past. Have you been following some of the developments over the last couple of months and year?
I have, but it's really not something I want to get into. I don't want to start throwing around suspicion and allegations. All I can say is I have a lot of sympathy for any woman or any man or any child who's had to sacrifice their will or sacrifice their body because somebody else didn't respect them. The most important thing I think in this world is that we have our sanctity and our right to decision making in our own body and what happens to our body, and that is a very powerful, important thing that each human being should have the right to. And so I stand with all survivors.